One bucket, 5 minutes to set up. 72 hours later, the mass inside has doubled. No soil, no sunlight, no watering, no weeding. You did not grow a plant, you grew meat. Specifically, you grew a living organism that the United States military classified as a strategic food asset in 1943. An organism so efficient at converting waste into edible protein that NASA studied it for deep space colonies where failure means starvation. Two things explain why almost nobody in the West knows about it. One involves a corporation that made $3 billion selling you an inferior version. The other involves a biological trick so strange that most people refuse to believe it until they see it with their own eyes. By the end of this video, I will show you the exact 5-minute setup that turns any bucket into a self-renewing protein factory. But first, you need to understand what this organism actually is and why it was deliberately kept out of your kitchen. Welcome back to Secrets Beneath Nature. If you have ever felt trapped by rising meat prices while watching your grocery bill climb every single month, what I am about to show you changes everything. Here is the organism. Pleurotus ostreatus. You may know it as the oyster mushroom, but forget everything you think you know about mushrooms. The mushroom you see at the grocery store is just the fruit, the reproductive organ. Underneath, there is something far more valuable, a network of microscopic threads called mycelium. And mycelium does something no plant and no animal can do. It eats dead matter and converts it directly into protein, coffee grounds, cardboard, straw, sawdust. The stuff you throw away every single day becomes the fuel for a living protein factory that never stops running. Indigenous communities understood this long before Western science caught up. In central Mexico, the Aztecs harvested a fungal growth called huitlacoche from corn. They called it the food of the gods. In Indonesia, communities have fermented soybeans with Rhizopus oligosporus for over 400 years to create tempeh, one of the most protein-dense fermented foods on the planet. In China, cultivation of edible fungi dates back over 1,000 years. The Compendium of Materia Medica, written in the 16th century, documents mushroom cultivation as both medicine and sustenance. These cultures never separated fungal protein from their diet because they never needed to. The fungi fed them reliably, cheaply, and without the environmental devastation that livestock farming demands. Then industrial agriculture decided that protein had to come from animals or from soy, and 1,000 years of fungal knowledge was quietly buried. Now, here is where the science gets unsettling. Mycelium is not a plant. It is not an animal. It is something else entirely. A 2020 paper published in Fungal Biology Reviews described mycelial networks as exhibiting decision-making behavior without a brain. The organism senses nutrients, redirects its growth toward food sources, and optimizes its expansion patterns in ways that researchers compare to neural networks. It does not photosynthesize. It does not need light at all. It grows in total darkness, feeding on whatever organic matter surrounds it. And it does this fast. Research published in the Journal of Fungi found that under favorable conditions, Pleurotus species can colonize a substrate completely within 7 to 14 days. But here's the part that matters for your bucket. The mycelial biomass itself, the dense white network that forms throughout the substrate, contains between 25 and 40% protein on a dry weight basis. A 2021 study in food chemistry confirmed that oyster mushroom mycelium provides all essential amino acids. The protein digestibility score rivals that of egg protein. You are not growing a supplement. You are growing complete nutrition. Let me put this into numbers that expose the absurdity of industrial meat production. Beef requires approximately 20,000 liters of water to produce 1 kilogram of protein. Mycelium-based protein requires a fraction of that. A 2023 life cycle analysis published in the Journal of Cleaner Production found that fungal mycoprotein generates roughly 1 kilogram of carbon dioxide equivalent per kilogram of product. Beef generates 27. That is not a marginal improvement. That is an entirely different category of efficiency. And the land use numbers are even more extreme. Traditional livestock farming requires between 6 and 17 square meters of land per gram of protein produced annually. Mycelium grows vertically, stacked in containers, in closets, in basements, in any dark space you can spare. The same protein output that demands acres of pasture fits inside a single room of your house. Now here's the part that should make you furious. In the 1960s, a British industrial company spent years screening thousands of fungal strains looking for the most efficient protein producer on Earth. They found it. Fusarium venenatum, a soil fungus that converts simple sugars into dense edible mycoprotein faster than any organism they had ever tested. They patented the process, built factories, and created a product you may have seen in your grocery store. They called it corn. That single product generated billions in revenue. But here is what they did not tell you. The fundamental biology is not proprietary. Dozens of edible fungal species perform the same conversion. Pleurotus ostreatus does it on waste you already produce. You do not need a factory. You do not need a patent. You do not need permission from a corporation. Yes, the organism does the work for free, and it has been doing it for roughly 400 million years. If you are learning something new, take a second and hit subscribe. It helps this channel keep bringing you information that the food industry would rather you never heard. NASA figured this out decades ago. When planning for long-duration space missions, they needed food systems that could sustain astronauts for years without resupply. Plants were too slow, livestock was impossible, fungi were the answer. Research conducted through the NASA Advanced Food Technology Program identified fungal cultivation as one of the most promising bioregenerative food production methods for space habitats. Mycelium grows in enclosed environments. It recycles organic waste into edible biomass. It requires no sunlight. It tolerates radiation. A 2019 paper from researchers at Stanford explored using mycelium not just as food, but as building material for space habitats. The same organism that feeds you could literally build your house on Mars. The Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency has also funded research into rapid fungal protein production for military field rations. When the military and the space program both invest in the same food source, that tells you something about its strategic value. So, why did this disappear from mainstream awareness? 3 forces worked against it. First, the economics of industrial agriculture depend on complexity. Long supply chains, refrigerated transport, processing facilities, and retail markup all generate profit at every step. A protein source that grows itself in a bucket in your garage eliminates every single middleman. There is no transport cost. There is no processing required. There is no shelf life problem because the organism is alive and self-renewing. Second, the visual problem. Western food culture values uniformity and appearance. A steak looks like food. A block of white mycelium growing on coffee grounds does not photograph well for a marketing campaign. The same aesthetic bias that made people reject insects as food for decades delayed acceptance of fungal protein. Third, the patent problem. You cannot patent a wild organism. Pleurotus ostreatus grows on every continent except Antarctica. It fruits on dead trees and forests all over the world. No seed company controls it. No biotech firm owns the genetics. When a food source cannot be monopolized, it does not attract the investment dollars that drive public awareness. Now, I promised you the 5-minute setup. Here is exactly how to build your own protein factory. You need a 5-gallon bucket with a lid. Drill 6 to 8 small holes around the sides for air exchange, each about 1/4 inch in diameter. You need a substrate. Coffee grounds work perfectly. If you do not drink coffee, ask any cafe and they will give you spent grounds for free. You can also use chopped straw, cardboard torn into small pieces, or hardwood sawdust. Avoid softwood and anything treated with chemicals. You need to pasteurize your substrate. The simplest method is to pour boiling water over it in a separate container, cover it, and let it cool to room temperature. This kills competing bacteria and molds without eliminating the nutrients your mycelium needs. Once cool, drain off any excess water. The substrate should feel damp like a wrung-out sponge. Now, add your spawn. Oyster mushroom grain spawn is available online for a few dollars. Mix the spawn thoroughly into your pasteurized substrate at a ratio of roughly 1 part spawn to 5 parts substrate. Pack the mixture into your bucket. Put the lid on. Place the bucket in a dark space at room temperature, ideally between 60 and 75 degrees Fahrenheit. That is the entire setup. Walk away. Over the next 7 to 14 days, the mycelium colonizes the entire substrate. You will see white threads spreading through the material, consuming it, converting dead organic matter into living protein. When the substrate is fully colonized, a dense white mass has replaced what was once garbage. You can harvest the entire block and start again with fresh substrate and a piece of your colonized material as the new spawn. The organism perpetuates itself. You never need to buy spawn again after the first batch. This is what self-replicating protein actually means. The system feeds itself forward indefinitely. For consumption, the colonized substrate can be sliced and cooked directly. The texture is dense and fibrous, similar to pulled meat. You can sauté it, bake it, or dehydrate it into a shelf-stable protein source. The flavor is mild and savory with natural umami. If you allow the mycelium to fruit, you also get oyster mushrooms, which adds variety to the harvest. But the mycelial biomass itself is the real prize. It is available weeks before any mushroom appears, and it contains the concentrated protein your body needs. One critical note: always use spawn from a reputable supplier for your first batch. Never cultivate wild fungi unless you have expert-level identification skills. Stick with well-established edible species like Pleurotus ostreatus, Pleurotus jamor, or Hericium erinaceus. These have centuries of documented safe consumption. The homesteading community has already figured this out. People are growing pounds of mycelial protein on spent brewery grain, on agricultural waste, on Amazon cardboard boxes broken down and pasteurized. Chicken keepers mix colonized substrate into feed and report healthier flocks. Gardeners use spent mushroom substrate as some of the richest compost available. The organism gives you protein first and then improves your soil afterward. Nothing is wasted. Every input becomes an output. Commercial interest is accelerating. Companies like Meaty Foods raise hundreds of millions of dollars to do at industrial scale what you can do in a bucket. Nature's Find received funding from the Breakthrough Energy Ventures Fund to produce fungal protein for retail sale. The same biological process available to anyone with a bucket and $5 worth of spawn now drives a global industry valued in the billions. What indigenous communities practiced for centuries became Silicon Valley's newest obsession overnight. Here is what they never wanted you to understand. Protein independence does not require land. It does not require livestock. It does not require permission from the industrial food system. The solution grows in darkness, feeds on waste, and doubles itself without asking anything from you in return. The Aztecs knew it. The Chinese documented it, NASA tested it, the military funded it, and now you know exactly how to do it yourself. While others wait for supply chains to stabilize and prices to drop, you can start printing your own protein tonight for the cost of a cup of coffee. If you found this valuable, watch the next video. Drop a comment and tell me, are you going to try this? And do not forget to subscribe. See you in the next one.